It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, live from Tel Aviv. Tonight, Israel continues its bombardment of Lebanon and Gaza, with loud blasts heard again in the Lebanese capital. Tomorrow marks 1 year since the attacks that changed everything in this region. We'll hear from those who survived and those who lost loved ones.
It was a day that I don't think I'll ever be able to forget. 15 terrorists, some of them with knives, some of them with guns.
And in Gaza, the 7 friends separated by conflict and the families trying to survive in a war zone.
Also coming up, from senior civil servant to Partygate investigator to chief of staff. But now Sue Gray has resigned from her role, admitting she risked becoming a distraction. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30.
Good evening from Tel Aviv. In less than 7 hours' time, in the early hours of the morning here, Israel will begin to mark the day that changed this region forever. Across the country, special events will be held to remember those murdered and kidnapped by Hamas militants. 12 months after the gunfire first rang out in Kibbutzim, close to the Gaza border, the Middle East is embroiled in an escalating and ever more destructive war. And in the past 20 minutes, loud blasts have been heard in the Lebanese capital, Beirut. We've received these images showing an explosion and thick plumes of smoke billowing into the night sky. It's the latest in a series of attacks launched by Israel on 2 fronts, targeting Gaza and Lebanon. Israel's military says it targeted a Hamas command and control center at a mosque and school in Deir al-Balah. The Hamas-run health ministry says 26 people were killed. And in Jabalia, 20 people died when airstrikes were launched at what Israel claims was a Hamas base. The IDF says it's expanding a humanitarian zone in the south of the Strip while ordering the evacuation of a large area of northern Gaza. At the same time, explosions have rocked the Lebanese capital. Well, much of the activity has been focused on the Dahir area in southern Beirut, where Hezbollah has a strong presence. Hezbollah has continued to fire from southern Lebanon, with projectiles intercepted in northern Israeli city of Kiryat Shimona. We begin in Beirut, from where our international correspondent, John Sparks, sent this report.
As the church bells summoned parishioners on Sunday morning, the Israelis dispatched munitions from the sky. The scale and intensity of their bombardment is accelerating in Beirut suburbs and across the region. We found the aftermath of one strike at the side of Beirut's old airport road. Here, a giant crater had replaced an industrial block. In the void, we saw smoke and rubble and metal bars twisted like spaghetti.
What was here?
There's medical equipments here, like storage for medical equipments. As you see, school, hotel, lightning here, lightning storage. They claim there's rockets here and bullets and everything, but no.
The Israeli military claimed it had successfully eliminated Hezbollah weapon stores. Images like this, proof that enemy ammunition had been destroyed. But locals told us the secondary explosions had been caused by oxygen tanks in the warehouse. Still, we didn't have much time to talk.
Okay, we're being...
Members of Hezbollah here moving us on. They didn't tell us why.
Local people say a medical warehouse, a sweet shop on the main floor, two-story building, but it's a massive crater now in its place. Still smoking. Yeah, we gotta go. We gotta go. We gotta go.
In Gaza, men taking shelter in this mosque didn't have time to leave the site. These scenes of chaos and human carnage were captured in the immediate aftermath of a strike in Deir al-Balah. Some were stuck underneath the rubble, others trapped by bodies that had pinned them down. Here, a young journalist called Hassan Hamad covers the bombardment for a Turkish news agency. The Israeli shelling's been going on all night, he says. A few hours later, he was hit by an artillery shell. His brother was only able to recognize him by his hair. Local officials said at least 19 people were killed in the mosque attack. The Israelis claimed they'd hit a Hamas command center here, but they haven't provided evidence. Their bombing campaign, part of a new military offensive in northern Gaza, and we see them moving an armored division along with troops into the enclave. A spokesman said Israel was preparing to dismantle terrorist infrastructure near Gaza City. The Israeli defense minister, here visiting an airbase, had his eyes on Iran. Judge us by our actions, he warned them.
Whoever thinks that by trying to attack Israel will deter us from reacting should look at what is happening in Gaza and what is happening in Beirut.
1 year after the beginning of the war in Gaza, this conflict has become the regional firestorm that many have feared, and there seems little or no prospect of peace. John Sparks, Sky News in Beirut.
Well, our special correspondent Alex Crawford is live in Beirut tonight. And once again, Alex, another massive bombardment.
Yeah, there's been quite intense bombing over the past hour or so. I've counted about 5 large plumes of smoke, big explosions. Looked in some cases as though there were secondary explosions, certainly lit up the skies. This was preceded by a lot of quite low Israeli drone activity over the city, which itself is very disconcerting. And earlier, the Israeli forces put out a warning to certain areas in the southern suburbs of Beirut to leave within the next hour or so. We've seen a real intense bombing over the past 2 weeks, but that has moved up a gear or two over the past few days. And we're seeing no let-up at all. We understand there's lots of airstrikes as well down south, right on the border, with even UNIFIL saying that there was a dangerous development because they felt that the Israeli forces were operating and carrying out actions which were very close to where the UN peacekeeping bases were, saying that they were putting at risk, actually, the peacekeepers operating down there. They have been more or less confined to their bases since this operation began. And of course, we've seen evacuations of about now 130 villages down south, with the expectation that this limited operation, that, as the Israelis have described it, is going to move into much more serious ground offensive. It's already looking that way, with huge areas of the country already deserted, or they're trying to empty out.
Alex Crawford, thank you. Israelis living in a kibbutz close to the Gaza border say it seemed like the end of the world when militants rampaged through their community, killing residents and taking hostages on October the 7th. Our Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkle has spoken to some of those whose lives changed forever on that day.
It was just after 6:30 a.m. when the first shots were fired.
I remember everything. I remember every detail. It doesn't leave me. It was a day that I don't think I'll ever be able to forget.
Kfar Aza, a kibbutz only 3 kilometers from the Gaza border, was one of the first reached by Hamas on that October Saturday morning. Residents hid in their shelters, unsure what was happening outside.
We didn't know anything. We didn't have light, we didn't have water. It was a hard day. Sad day.
It seemed like the end of the world. My house was shaking from all the rockets that were coming out of Gaza. That's how close it is. And in a WhatsApp group, somebody wrote that they can hear shooting. That was the Hamas terrorists killing people already. And then we heard the shooting coming closer and closer to the house. And then they shot the house. And then we heard them walking inside the house next to the door of the little shelter. You could hear the steps, and they were shouting and screaming in Arabic. And they started shooting around us. There must have been something like 15 terrorists, some of them with knives, some of them with guns, and they shot us inside the house.
It was 12 hours before the Israeli military arrived. It then took them days to retake the kibbutz. Finally, on Tuesday morning, after 3.5 days of fighting, the longest battle was over. 64 Israelis had been killed. Aviv Baram died defending the kibbutz.
After he has been injured, he called Kheli and said, Kheli, I'm injured. And she asked him if he can move a bit. And he moved close to the big olive tree. And that's where we found him, where the army found him. And the last time that he wrote for Kheli that, I love you all.
"18 residents had also been taken hostage by Hamas. Some dead, some alive. They were forced into Gaza.
They pushed us, and Keith fell, and they broke his ribs. And they shot us, and one of the bullets hit Keith's hand. I remember going through the Michshol, that's the big, huge fence. It was just open, and we just drove into Gaza.
Kfar Aza today is a ghost village. A few people have returned, if their houses are still standing.
Why did you choose me back? I didn't see any other option except to live in my house, my land. It's what I owe to this country, what I owe to my father. This is the education that I got. You never leave the house, never leave the land. So we came back.
Massive weekly protests have been held across Israel, demanding a ceasefire and a hostage deal. It hasn't happened. 97 of the hostages taken on October the 7th are still being held in Gaza. Aviva Siegel was released last November. Her husband, Keith, wasn't.
I bent down to him and said that he said that I'm going to Israel and that he must be strong for me and I'll be strong for him. And that's how we separated. He didn't say a word. He was in a shock. I was in a shock. I didn't believe. I don't know what Keith thought. I've got no idea what Keith thought. And he managed that moment.
He said nothing.
He said nothing.
October the 7th changed everything. For millions, it was the day normal life paused. A year on, the war in Gaza continues and conflict has spread across the region. More than 42,000 have been killed in Gaza. But Hamas remains undefeated. Benjamin Netanyahu promised Israelis total victory over their enemies. It is unclear when or how that will come. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News in Kfar Aza.
In Gaza, Israel's military assault on Hamas has left the region in ruins. And Gaza's health ministry estimates as many as 42,000 Palestinians have been killed. Tens of thousands more have been displaced and separated from their loved ones, as Sky's Adam Parsons reports.
What's left behind in Gaza's rubbled landscape are the survivors, many of them traumatised and bewildered. Al-Shifa used to be Gaza's biggest medical complex. Israel targeted it, insisting the hospital contained a Hamas command centre. Danya worked there as a nurse with her friends. They used to go to the beach, celebrate together. This was a birthday party at the end of September. A few weeks later, 2 of these friends were killed in Israeli airstrikes. The photo, a touchstone to a happier time.
We never imagined it would be our last time together. All that's left now are the pictures we have together. Our memories, our lives just disappeared.
Dunya has fled Gaza City. She now works at this hospital in Deir al-Balah. Her friends have also been displaced and dispersed.
Currently, we're scattered in different places. One of us is in the north. There's no way for me to reach her. She can't come here. I can't go there.
Her grief is echoed across Gaza. This is Hussam.
Hi, Darien.
His daughter Darine fled south to Khan Yunis to seek shelter, while her father and brother stayed behind in Gaza City. Far from being safe, Darine was killed in an airstrike along with 4 relatives. Her father still stunned.
We all dreamt of her graduation day and of seeing her become a doctor. We wanted to be there for her in times of joy and times of sadness.
Hussam now shelters in this school in Gaza City, where Darine was taught before the war came. It has been battered, but it's still just about standing, and it's just about safe. Also sheltering here, Darine's old teacher, Rula, who tries to maintain some small sense of normality for the children who come in to learn, but she is surrounded by a blend of chaos and peril.
The large level of destruction and families having to move around constantly is a challenge for students who want to learn. I lost a lot. I lost my home, my family, some of my students who are very dear to me.
Gaza is a shell-shocked place full of shell-shocked people, a land of ruined buildings and wrecked lives. Adam Parsons, Sky News.
And tomorrow we'll have a special programme marking 1 year of war. That is from midday here on Sky News. Well, in Hostage Square, the countdown clock shows there are just 6 hours to go to mark the 1 year anniversary of the moment Hamas broke through the border at Gaza, started attacking the kibbutz in the south and the Nova Music Festival. Our coverage from there will start with my colleague Yalda Hakim at 6 o'clock in the morning. From Tel Aviv, back to Barbara for more of the day's news.
Anna, thank you. Now, in other news this evening, she's the former senior civil servant who's been caught up in rows over her salary and freebies. Today, Sue Gray resigned as the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, admitting that she risked becoming a distraction. Sky's political correspondent Liz Bates reports.
From top civil servant to Partygate investigator to Keir Starmer's top aide. But just 3 months in, Sue Gray has quit Number 10. Her role was behind the scenes, but too often she was in the glare of the political spotlight. Now weeks of private power struggles and public criticism have ended in her departure. Today, in a statement, she said, "Throughout my career, my first interest has always been public service. However, in recent weeks, it has become clear to me that intense commentary around my position risks becoming a distraction to the government's vital work of change. It is for that reason I have chosen to stand aside." Keir Starmer said, "I want to thank Sue for all the support she has given me, both in opposition and in government, and her work to prepare us for government and get us started on our programme of change." But what does this say about his government?
I think it's probably unsurprising. There's been a lot of controversy around her. And I think ultimately politicians have to take responsibility. There's been some mistakes, probably hasn't been enough humility over that. And maybe we need to see U-turn on policy rather than shifting around of staff.
For years, Sue Gray quietly rose up the ranks in Whitehall, but then suddenly became a household name during the Partygate scandal.
Sue Gray published her final report, which I commissioned.
Not long after, it emerged that the Labour leader was looking to hire her, prompting outrage from Conservative MPs.
One of the most senior civil servants in the country was conniving in secret meetings with the party of opposition.
Sue Gray's short time as Chief of Staff here in Downing Street has been marred by constant leaks and negative stories aimed at her. About her salary, higher than the Prime Minister's, about her role in the mishandling of the Lord Ali freebies affair, and about the constant tensions between her and the man who will now replace her in the top job, Morgan McSweeney. Credited with Labour's first election victory in 19 years, he served as Starmer's Chief of Staff before, and now, with Sue Gray gone, Morgan McSweeney takes over as one of the most powerful figures in government.
Keir Starmer promised before the election that we would have a return to stability. And I think that's something that was attractive to a lot of people after the last few years, but this is manifestly not stability. And so the operation that he has put in place has gone badly wrong.
She's been by his side, but no longer. The Prime Minister closing the door on Sue Gray, hoping to leave behind a difficult start to his premiership. Liz Bates, Sky News, Westminster.
Well, let's bring in our deputy political editor, Sam Coates. Sam, the Prime Minister keen to show that he is in control of what's happening in Number 10 after what have been, let's face it, an unsteady couple of weeks.
That's right. It turned out that in the end, the veteran fixer just couldn't fix it. Sue Gray, perhaps the most notable Chief of Staff in modern times, and that's not a good thing, out as a mid-ranking envoy now with a pay cut. Because even though we have had weeks of speculation, Keir Starmer forced to move dramatically today. Her exit, all but inevitable at this point. She was somebody who was known as a consummate Whitehall veteran, there to smooth Labour's transition into power, but there simply wasn't a plan for the opening days of government, I'm told, and she was losing big battles in the building behind me, including over who should be the most senior civil servant running what goes on behind the black door. She was the ethics chief for multiple administrations, but Freebiegate dominated the headlines. Now, these things can't all automatically just be put at her door. Self-evidently, Keir Starmer himself made a big misjudgment about who he put in that critical role, despite warnings before she was appointed and while they were in opposition. So this is on him. Has he made other personnel mistakes? But will the new team sort out the problem? That's the big question. He's brought in people from elsewhere in Whitehall, from the private sector, but the big choice is the arrival and putting in Morgan McSweeney, the election Svengali, into the role of Chief of Staff. That is a punt. He was the guy that did the job first in 2020. He lasted 14 months and then was out because Keir Starmer then didn't think he was the right fit. Is he the fit now? One person in Whitehall said to me tonight, no more excuses. We have everybody in the right job doing the right job now. So if we make mistakes from this point on, perhaps we're just not up to it.
Sam Coates with the latest outside Downing Street. Sam, thank you. Now, the Home Office says 973 people crossed the Channel in small boats yesterday. That's the highest number in a single day since November 2022. The crossings happened on the same day that 4 people, including a 2-year-old boy, died off the coast of France. More than 26,000 people have arrived on small boats so far this year. A British climber has been rescued from a mountainside in northern India after being trapped for 3 days. 37-year-old Faye Manners went missing after trekking up the Chowkamba mountain with the climber Michelle Dvorak. Rescuers say they were found stranded at an altitude of about 6,000 meters. Let's get the latest sport now from Sky Sports News and Rahul.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
Tea at the cricket. For many, it's as important as the action on the pitch. Egg and cress sandwiches, tea, scones and cake. But that's not the tradition everywhere.
So, here we go. Chicken. Oh, it's chicken.
In the summer, the ECB launched their Taste of Cricket campaign, celebrating diversity at clubs around the country. This event in London even had a touch of glamour.
Roll up, roll up, roll up for Carl's jerk chicken.
You think about the diversity in cricket, all the countries that are involved with that. To just have to say, what do you do for afternoon tea? What do you eat? Most people think of cucumber sandwiches or a bit of egg and cress. And then suddenly you come to the Shepherd's Bush cricket ground where we are today, and it's all about jerk chicken and wonderful Jamaican patties and stuff.
For cricket bosses, this is just one small step in rebuilding the damaged reputation of the game and making it open to everyone.
Cricket has had a lot of issues around discrimination, ethnicity, race, gender, and we were trying to find ways to bring communities together, create some more trust, not suggesting for a second that we put on some community events and then all of cricket's issues are resolved. But alongside all of the policy changes, I think it's really important that these community events that celebrate people, celebrate all of the different communities that exist within cricket, are still really important to do at the same time.
For Club Life member Carl Menzies, a day watching the cricket is much better with a dash of fun, food and community.
The cricket is not just, cucumber sandwiches, you know what I mean? Especially West Indians, we like a good food on a cricket day, you know what I mean? On a Sunday, you go to play and you get your rice and peas and you get your jerk this and your jerk that. And so food, cricket, music is all integral part of, Caribbean cricket.
English cricketer Chris Jordan was born in Barbados, and the day brought back some special childhood memories.
A really refreshing experience, I'd say. I think from the time I walked through the gates here today, I really felt the welcoming. I felt the inclusiveness, and yeah, the food helped as well. But no, I think it's a really special thing they have going on here, so I was glad to be a part of it.
Cricket brought the family together, and my Uncle Tim would come over, my Uncle Vic would come over, Uncle Dubs and Auntie Cherry, and everybody would congregate, and it was all centred around cricket, but food was there. Whether that be jerk chicken, rice and peas, coleslaw, you name it, patties, all sorts of things that went on. That was all about bringing families and people together. It's like what's happening here today.
Lasting memories formed and friendships made. But will it help communities up and down the country rediscover their taste for cricket? Chris Reedy, Sky Sports.
I don't care if Manchester United don't win football matches all the time. I genuinely don't. I know at some point in the future that Manchester United will have their day again. That at this moment in time, Liverpool are doing really well over the last few years, and City have done brilliantly well, and Arsenal have done brilliantly well. They're great football clubs who will always do well at certain times in history, and Manchester United will have to have a dip. That's fine by me. My whole childhood was spent without a Premier League title or a League One title, Division One title.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Well, let's return to the conflict in the Middle East. And as the families of hostages still being held in Gaza gathered in Tel Aviv this evening to demand the return of their loved ones, similar events were being held in the UK too. Today, the mother of the only British hostage still being held added her voice to those calls. Mandy Damari said her daughter Emily had been stripped of every human right. Tom Cheshire has this report.
They assembled here not in protest, but in memory. Thousands gathered in Hyde Park to mark a year since the brutal October the 7th attack, to mourn the hundreds killed in it, to hope for the hostages still held by Hamas. One of those is Emily Damari, a British citizen kidnapped from her kibbutz, a year on, still in captivity in Gaza. Her mother Mandy spoke for the first time in public.
My beautiful, funny and brave daughter, who I love to the moon and back, deserves to come home. I need to hug her again, and I need to see her smile.
October the 7th was the trigger, but it's been forgotten as the reason that all this hell has broken loose.
we haven't forgotten them every week, every day of our lives since October the 7th.
These are people who aren't just Jewish, these are people from all cultures and all the rest of it, and that we must never forget.
There's so much sound and fury in this conflict, in the Middle East itself, here on the streets in London, but this here is a lot more quiet, a lot more sombre. The organisers lit 23 candles to mark all the communities and places attacked on October the 7th. And they held a minute's silence. Hyde Park was not the only gathering. In Manchester, they also marked the anniversary.
Bring them home!
Among them, Adam Marnett, whose cousin was murdered on October the 7th, the rest of the family taken hostage.
My cousin, Tsahi, who's hostage in Gaza, his firstborn daughter, Mayan, was murdered on October 7th. She was 18 years old. She had just turned 18 only a few days before. The balloons from her party were still up in the house when the terrorists had gained entry into the community where they live near the Gaza border.
As strong as memory was, hope was present among those we spoke to in Hyde Park. Hope for the hostages, hope somehow for peace. Tom Cheshire, Sky News, Central London.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by journalist and author Christina Patterson and writer and broadcaster Esther Kreiku. Among the stories we'll be discussing this on the front of the Financial Times about today's big news from Downing Street. Their headline, Grey forced out as Starmer moves to get grip on number 10. We'll be right back.
Big stories don't always come from big cities. I'm Lisa Dowd and I'm Sky's Midlands correspondent, and this is where I grew up. We can reveal that the driver who hit Harry Dunn is 42-year-old Anne Sakoulas.
Just met the president and we never thought we'd get this far.
This is what they're up against, that the wind is the really big problem. It is back-breaking work and the smoke is thick. It's been working well. Water levels are dropping, but no one knows what impact further rain will have. What would you do if this place wasn't open? We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world.
It's really scary. We're terrified.
In this community, I'm told that everybody knows someone affected by COVID.
Hopefully this will be the last wave.
I never knew they would make it. It's amazing.
Change seems tantalisingly close in this corner of the UK. Wales was the first to introduce the plastic bag charge. This is my patch, my specialism. It's also my home.
App gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos, analysis, up at 6%. Podcasts, watching us live. Joins us live all in one place and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
Day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
You want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news. I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win.
Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
This is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. First, though, our top stories. Israel has continued its strikes in Lebanon with what's been described as the most intense bombardment since the conflict escalated. It comes ahead of the first anniversary of Hamas's attack on Israel, in which more than 1,200 people were killed and over 250 taken hostage. And Sue Gray has resigned as Downing Street Chief of Staff just 3 months after Labour won the election. Hello there, you're watching the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with the journalist and author Christina Patterson and writer and broadcaster Esther Kreku. Welcome both. So let's see what is on some of those front pages. Well, the resignation of Sue Gray as Sir Keir Starmer's Chief of Staff is top story in the Financial Times. The paper says that she was forced out as the PM tries to get a grip on his problems in Downing Street. The Eye too says she's fallen victim to a Downing Street power struggle. The Express says she's leaving what the paper describes as Starmer's sinking ship. The Telegraph says the PM wielded the knife after a wave of infighting and leaks. The Metro is in full-on pun mode with this headline asking the question, a bad Gray at the office, Keir? In the Mail, Tory leadership candidate Kemi Badenoch calls the situation a farce and proof that the PM lacks judgment. And then to the Middle East conflict, and on the first anniversary of the Hamas attacks that sparked the current crisis, the Mirror speaks to the mother of one Israeli hostage who says it's now time for peace. And the reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the program, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by journalist and author Christina Patterson and writer and broadcaster Esther Kreku. Thank you both so much for being with us. Okay, well, let's, in a way, one story is dominating the headlines, as in the main story, but of course what's happening in the Middle East is in all the papers as well. Let's start with that. Let's look at the front page of the Mirror. Very strong headline there. It's been a year of hell. Time to find peace. Calls to end killing as Brit mum pleads for hostage daughter. And that's the story that we were mentioning now. Emily Damari, 28, the British Israeli hostage, still being held in Gaza. Christina, it's a year on, which is hard to believe, isn't it?
Yeah, I remember sitting here a year ago when we were all absolutely shell-shocked by what had happened, and nobody could have begun to imagine the horrors that have happened in the last year. And this headline, it's been a year of hell, is simply a statement of fact. It has been a year of hell for the families of the hostages who are still going through the agony, those of the families of the hostages who have not yet been returned, like Mandy Damari. And of course, it has been a year of hell in Gaza, and a year of hell seems to be, we don't know how long it's going to be, but now hell has been unleashed in Lebanon as well. I think we must all remember the hostages at this time and the horrific events of the 7th of October when Hamas unleashed hell in Israel. But I'm afraid it does also seem as if the person who has not been thinking very much of the hostages is Benjamin Netanyahu, because he seems to have been focused on other things. And he has given no indication at any point that rescuing the hostages and getting them back safely to their families has been his priority. If that had been his priority, he would have taken a very different course of action, but it clearly hasn't been, and that is another layer of the multi-layered tragedy that we're looking at today.
And over the months, we have, of course, seen many demonstrations in Israel of Israelis, criticising Netanyahu for not prioritising the hostages as they see it. Esther, before coming to you, let's just look at the Telegraph. And there's a front page of the Telegraph, and they have a picture here of Emily Damari, and what they're writing, October 7th, Britain has forgotten one of its own. So again, taking the line about the Israeli-British hostage, the only one still left in Gaza.
Absolutely. I mean, I think a year on, everyone hoped we would be in a different place. It doesn't look like things are getting better. It looks like things are getting worse. This conflict seems to be proliferating. Iran is getting bolder. Obviously, this conflict has now spread to Lebanon, and of course there is no end in sight for what the Gazans are going through, which is actually another thing that Benjamin Netanyahu has drawn criticism of. The IDF don't want to be stuck in Gaza for
and there was another attack in Gaza just today.
Of course, for the foreseeable future. I mean, the quite interesting thing, and the ironic thing actually, is Netanyahu has been rebounding in the polls recently, specifically following his attack against Hezbollah. So it's quite interesting how a year has changed the public's perception. We have to remember that before the October the 7th, there were thousands of Israelis that were protesting against Netanyahu's proposed reforms for the judiciary. You had loads of IDF reservists that actually went on strike to oppose him. So he was really not, he was persona non grata in public opinion, but now he seems to be rebounding in the polls. Obviously, it's not enough for him to make a political comeback, but the criticism that he is potentially prolonging this conflict in Gaza and deliberately delaying some sort of long-term plan for the region because it cannot go on as it is, it seems to hold a lot of weight, and that's what really concerns me, because this, as the situation currently stands, it's unsustainable on all sides. In the space of a few months, Israel has lost $2 billion worth of capital in capital flight from people actually just moving their money to foreign banks because they don't see the situation stabilizing anytime soon. And of course, the hostages still being stuck in Gaza is an awful situation. I just think, by and large, most people were hoping for more progress a year on, and it seems like things have only got worse. And the nightmare scenarios, they're only going to get worse from now, and we could potentially be looking at regional conflict, full-out regional conflict.
And just bear with us, because we're getting some live pictures now, or latest pictures, rather, from Beirut, because attacks are continuing there. We can see that's the latest images that we're getting, yet more explosions. We saw several explosions last night as well, which a Lebanese news agency has said was the worst night of the attacks so far in the fight between Hezbollah and Israel. So those are the latest pictures from Beirut. A reminder, as if we needed any, that now Israel is fighting a war on many fronts. Let me just bring the front page of the Financial Times up. And it says, a year on, Israel marks the first anniversary of the heinous Hamas attack that sparked the war. And that's a memorial, the picture there, memorial in Jerusalem for the victims of October 7th. And Christina, before coming to you, again, the Telegraph. And here it says, stand behind us, Netanyahu warns the West. What are they saying here specifically?
Well, he's been speaking to Emmanuel Macron, who said that France was going to start limiting its arms deliveries to Israel. And I don't know what he said exactly to Macron, because Macron seems to have changed his mind. Now, obviously, the 7th of October, or the eve of the 7th of October, is a tough time for anyone in the West to start reducing their arms deliveries to Israel, because obviously it's an incredibly emotive anniversary, and I'm afraid one that Netanyahu will be leveraging in any way he can. I think that most leaders in the West are now thinking this is well out of control. Biden, unfortunately, appears to be too weak to do anything. It's not quite clear why he's 3 weeks
from an election as well.
The man is gaga. I mean, when he was asked whether he knew about the ground invasion into Lebanon, he seemed completely startled, like he had no idea, where he was. So this is not someone who's even cognizant of the current situation. But I think on your point, it really is stand by Israel, fine. But for many in the West, the impression is, OK, is there any sort of give and take going on here? Because the Americans were informed of the IDF's planned ground invasion into Lebanon. For a country that gives Israel, I think, $3 or $4 billion worth of military assistance, you would expect a bit more dialogue than to inform. Now, maybe it's because of how they see Biden. They see him as an ineffective leader. Maybe they didn't want his input. OK, that's fine. But many in the West don't feel like this situation is in control. In fact, it seems like out of control, and every day we're inching closer and closer towards World War III. And that's something that the West is not willing to be dragged into under any circumstances, no matter how friendly Israel's allies are to it.
I'm going to have to leave it there because, of course, we could talk about it for much, much longer. Let's take a look at another story that is making all the front pages as well. Let's start with the FT. So front page of the Financial Times, Gray forced out as Starmer moves to get grip on number 10. So this is Sue Gray that, well, stood down, was pushed, whatever, however you want to see it, because she feared becoming a distraction.
Well, she didn't resign, did she? I mean, resign in inverted commas. She was given an opportunity to exit gracefully. And yes, Starmer has finally taken some action. I'm afraid he has looked very weak in the past 3 months because it's been a total mess at Downing Street. And the conference, which should have been such a triumphant occasion after 14 years out of power, was a mess. And all the scandal, I'm not sure how much of a scandal it was, but it looked terrible in terms of expenses and suits and glasses and free tickets and all the rest of it. And somebody clearly didn't have a grip on it. And it looks as if, well, Sue Gray was the Chief of Staff, so clearly she needed to take responsibility. It remains to be seen. Morgan McSweeney will be taking on her role. He's not experienced in government. He's meant to be more of a political operator. It remains to be seen whether someone gets a grip. Now, I really hope they do, because I want this Labour government to succeed, but I have to say they've made a pretty appalling start.
And so let's just scroll through some front pages before I come to you. So the Metro front page there, that's the pun title, A Bad Gray at the Office, Keir. And then The Eye, Gray ousted in Downing Street power struggles. That's front page of The Eye. And the Express make their views very clear. Starmer Chief Sue Gray exits his sinking ship. Is it a sinking ship?
Well, I mean, that's the main concern, because really all of this is a reflection of Keir Starmer's leadership, as opposed to sort of the petty infighting, or whether, you know, some of his aides were happy that Sue Gray was earning more money than him, which I don't actually think was much of a problem. She could very well be good enough to earn more than the Prime Minister. She's a very experienced civil servant. However, it's the fact that this sort of petty infighting has been able to destabilise his leadership. Is he someone that is equipped to call the shots? One of the things that I'm sure Labour is keeping their eyes on are the polls, because once you actually calcify low poll ratings, it's really hard to turn that ship around, and that's something that the Tories learnt the very hard way.
Gonna have to leave it there. Coming up, the number of migrant arrivals across the Channel hits the highest daily total in nearly 2 years. We'll be discussing that next.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
I'm Dominic Waghorn, Sky's International Affairs Editor, covering a world that seems to be unravelling. War, unrest, revolutions.
It's not his country, it's ours, and we're going to take it back.
They have succeeded for the first time in their country's history in removing a leader from power. Now, freedom! There was fighting here, but there's clearly now a lull, and they're using it to bring up more ammunition. We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world. This is a mass exodus in which Russia is hemorrhaging some of its brightest and its best. According to the local weather channel, there have been more than 2,500 lightning strikes, torrential rain and flash flooding, all on top of this week's lethal tornado. What stays with you most in this job is some of the people you meet. What is your worst fear about what the Russians want to do to the children?
They're just boosting demographics by stealing young people.
Would you like to take the opportunity, Mr. President, on Sky News to invite Barack Obama to come here? Mr. Trump, are you running for president? Can you confirm it?
We're going to take a look, a very serious look.
On that day, we saw your fighters killing women, killing children. Was that a mistake? Did you go too far? You couldn't control your fighters? The full force of the state is being used to crush any protest. It's half an hour now past the deadline that Hamas issued with its ultimatum to the people of Ashkelon, and we've now seen a third barrage of rockets coming in. Another alarm. The mood here is jittery and nervous. We're seeing the world get more and more divided, and it's our job to try to make sense of it all.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me once again, the journalist and author Christina Patterson and the writer and broadcaster Esther Kreku. Okay, let's go to the front page of The Telegraph, a story that they've got here. More illegal migrants in UK than anywhere else in Europe. Esther, what's the story? What are they saying?
So we have about 745,000 illegal immigrants, according to this latest study, as opposed to France's 300,000. So we have more than double that of France and that of Germany as well. And I suspect, I mean, there are a couple of reasons for this. One is actually our lack of ID cards. So we live in such a high-trust society that it's a lot easier to do things in this country without ID cards. I mean, you can have a driver's license, but we don't have an official ID card. So it's a lot easier just to function in society without...
It's illegal to go around without your ID card.
Exactly. But also another thing is, actually industries that hire a lot of illegal workers. We have the fewest number of regulators per worker in many industries in this country. So, for example, the care industry, it's a lot easier to work as an illegal migrant because there's such few regulators. And it's these kinds of things that have compounded to make it actually quite a favourable environment for people who are here illegally to work and thrive. But the ID cards is an interesting one because when Tony Blair tried to introduce it, he really didn't get very far. I mean, I think the last real attempt was sometime in 2011 when the scheme kind of carried on to Cameron's government, and then that lost funding as well, so it never really picked up. But this idea that people can move through Britain and sort of sneak into the underbelly of society without having some form of identification is a real problem.
Christina, briefly?
Yeah, I've never understood the opposition to ID cards. There's this kind of, I remember people like Marc Francois talking about a kind of papers, please society, as if that was going to turn it into the Soviet Union. I think it's a no-brainer. If you want to control, I mean, the complicated palaver that, various, like the Tories, the Rwanda scheme and so on, the things that they are having to dream up in order to control this, when ID cards would go a very long way to sorting it out. But also, it has to be said that the reason there are 740,000 illegal migrants in the UK, if that's an accurate number, is because the Tories have mismanaged it for 14 years. Whose fault do they think it is? Who's been in power for 14 years? They were in no way on top of illegal migration, and they weren't processing people in time, so it's their mess. They should own it.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's an interesting... Sorry,
we have 90 seconds. I just want to look at another story, which is The Express, page 2, crop of The Express. Chancellor risks triggering sharp interest rate rise, which is it's going to make the heart sink of many a mortgage holder. Christina.
Yeah, that is makes my heart sink as well. An official modelling exercise by the Treasury apparently indicates that Rachel Reeves' plans to change fiscal rules so she can borrow more could trigger a sharp interest rate rise. Let's hope it doesn't. I mean, she is pretty boxed in at the moment, and if she sticks to the fiscal rules, then it seems that there is almost no money to do anything. But she seems to be between the devil and the deep blue sea at the moment, so let's just hope this is wrong.
Well, I mean, the interesting thing is £50 billion of extra government spending is still borrowing. That's the thing that, no one wants to say. She's still going to borrow more money. And that's the kind of thing that's going to spook the markets. So, she is stuck between a rock and a hard place. Most people would turn to actually encouraging private business and actually growing the economy as opposed to, trying to borrow your way out of this crisis. But again, we're in such desperate need of investment in public infrastructure and services that she may have to do this. It just depends on how she's able to calm the markets and say, look, there's a long-term strategy here.
Esther Christina, thank you so much. We'll see you again in the next hour to go through the papers a little bit more. Now, let's take a look at the weather. Now, we're in for an unsettled few days with showers and longer spells of rain moving through. There'll be quite a mild start tomorrow. Much of Ireland, Northern Ireland and eastern England will be fine, but northern Scotland will be wet, while southern and western Britain will see a scattering of showers. The morning looks breezy with prolonged rain over northern Scotland becoming increasingly confined to the far north. Elsewhere, most parts will keep some good sunny spells, but sometimes heavy and possibly thundery showers will develop widely. It'll be a bit warmer in the south, cooler in the north. There'll be little change through the afternoon, but the southwest will see more general heavy, showery rain moving in. The rest of Britain will see showers becoming more isolated later. Now, Tuesday will bring sunny spells and showers to most parts again, and more general rain to southern and central Scotland and the far north. It will be cooler in the north and windy in the southeast and near northwestern coasts. Wednesday will be unsettled and chilly in the north. Coming up next on Sky News at 11, we'll have all the latest developments from the Middle East as Israel prepares to mark 1 year since the October the 7th Hamas attacks.